I became a prosecutor after working in the private sector for 2 years. I worked for a firm and I handled family law, I handled landlord-tenant law, civil litigation, but my favorite field was criminal law. I really took a liking to it. I liked that it was straightforward. I liked that the stakes seemed pretty high. So I worked in private practice for 2 years, but over time I kind of realized that I wasn't so interested in representing an individual person. You know, when you're a defense attorney, you represent your client, their needs, their interests, what they want, and that's fine. You need defense attorneys that do that. We need that for this whole system to work. But I kind of realized that I would find it more fulfilling and find it more interesting to serve my local community, to serve victims of crimes, to do what's best for the interests of justice, and even inevitably, I think ultimately what's best for a defendant, even because, you know, I think there are repercussions for everything we do, whether criminal or anything we do in life, and I think that not holding somebody accountable doesn't do them any good either. I think the best part about being a prosecutor is, this may seem somewhat philosophical, but I like that I'm doing something important. You know, out of law school, I had a lot of friends that, you know, they go into big law or they do business law, real estate law. Not to take away from that, not to say that those are unimportant. Those are very important jobs. But when it comes to criminal law, I think that the stakes are very high. And when it comes to being a prosecutor, I think the stakes are especially high because, you know, you're not beholden to an individual, you're not beholden to a single boss. Your job is, you know, in our description, there's a misconception that, you know, well, we want to get the biggest prison sentence, the best possible deal on our end. Our job description is to serve the interests of justice. So I think that having a job where you have that in mind and that's what you're aiming at, I think that that's really fulfilling. When it comes to the difficult aspects of being a prosecutor, initially I want to say the pragmatic things. We're busy. I mean, all attorneys are busy, but we, you know, if you look at our caseloads, they're very heavy. But not only that, we have jury trials set every single week. Now, granted, a lot of those do plead out, but you might have several weeks in a row where you have, you know, 3 jury trials that you have to take care of, and that takes a lot of preparation, that takes a lot of effort, and it's really mentally exhausting, honestly. But while that's difficult, I think that actually the more difficult thing is we deal with really difficult subject matter. We see some of the most difficult aspects of humanity, I think. I mean, we see sex crimes, we see murders, we see assaults, we see people who are really deep into drug abuse. I think that people like to say, you know, that you can separate that emotionally, but I don't care how strong of a person you are. I really think that if you do this job long enough, these things do weigh on you, and there are times where it's hard to separate that, and I think that's a difficult aspect of this job. I'd say that the case that's impacted me the most came at my last position. I was a prosecuting attorney in Wayne County for almost 2 years, and I handled a specialized docket that was exclusively domestic violence cases and misdemeanor sex crimes. Mostly domestic violence. And there's one case that stands out and that I think affected me both in kind of negative ways and positive ways. The case was essentially that there was this married couple. They were in their 20s, they had a few kids together, and the husband had been physically abusive for years. As people who deal with domestic violence know, it's not as easy as just dropping another person and leaving. So she was in this cycle of abuse for years, and when she came to the police department in her town, she was divorcing him, and she had actually been kind of keeping track of what he had done to her over the past couple of years. So there were 2 specific instances that I had to deal with in that case. Both she had filmed on her phone. One was, there was a video, you couldn't really see anything, but you heard her screaming, you heard him striking her, you heard him telling her not to get up, saying things like, "Do you want some more?" The other video was a nanny camera that she had taken a recording of, where the husband was changing their 1.5-year-old's diaper and was abusing the child. He struck the child in the face. He was screaming in the child's face, and at one point he took the clean diaper and he whipped the child with it. So that case, I worked a lot on that, and I reviewed those videos a lot because I was working with this attorney who was being pretty stubborn, and essentially had to review those videos a lot, reviewed them with people in my office, and ultimately sat down with this attorney and said, "I don't care what you say, there's no fighting this." And in doing that, I was able to just get them to agree to plea. And ultimately, at sentencing, there was a pre-sentence investigation, and I made sure that the judge got those videos, because you can only glean so much from a police report. And I said, just make sure you watch these before sentencing. And the judge did, and he played them at sentencing, and the defendant got near the maximum sentence. So that affected me in a negative way, because I now have a 7-month-old, and I can't change his diaper without thinking of that video, and that's really hard. I think probably the biggest misconception is that, for lack of a better term, that prosecutors are authoritarian. You know, that we do this job, we want the biggest sentence, we want to make this person pay, that we're jerks, essentially. And that's not really the case. I mean, for a lot of our cases, we do genuinely look at them, especially drug cases and things like that. We say, especially when they first come to us, we say, okay, what's a sentence that can make this person understand that this is not acceptable, and what can we do to prevent them from coming back, both for their sake and for the community's sake. And then there are a lot of pragmatic reasons that people take this job, and I think that there's this idea that, if you're a prosecutor, you're part of law enforcement, you're trying to, as my brother says, trying to stick them to the wall, and that's really not the case. Prosecutors aren't jerks. Prosecutors aren't out for blood, and honestly, some of the funniest people I know are prosecutors. Maybe you have to be in this job, but I'd say that's the biggest misconception.